Crypto and XRP in particular, at least through the last couple of weeks, have been struggling to break back into a healthy range. In other words, we're not in bear market territory just yet, as we're currently holding up at a support of 230 up to about 245, which when you zoom out to that weekly time frame, you can see it's acted as a great resistance, which has now become a support. But I would like to see the market recover a little bit better. Either way, we have a ton of trade volume right through this range right here. And if I get out of the way, you can see that right now XRP is holding in this range almost exactly where we have a lot of interest from a volume standpoint. So if XRP can hold this range and Bitcoin truly is in a major bull market, when we go ahead and look at the exchange reserves, even over the last couple of days, exchange reserves have consistently been declining, which is an indicative of major demand from institutional players. Right now, it is flatlining, which means it's not being ripped off exchanges to the same degree, probably due to a lack of buying in spot ETFs. Either way, this major low, if any more demand continues, will create something we call a supply crunch. And so as long as Bitcoin can hold at least 108K to 107K and then start to trend back to the upside, then XRP should be able to hold the 240 range, which will act as a good support for a move back up to at least 275. Now, some days things move really quick, other days they move really slow, usually for weeks where we get bored. And when things get boring, that's when news like this comes out. In other words, the Federal Reserve Governor Christopher Waller has suggested a compromise over the crypto world's master accounts. In other words, crypto was seriously attacked and wasn't allowed access to any master accounts at the Federal Reserve for many years. Many crypto companies were getting debanked. There was a major lawsuit in this case. And through the entire Biden administration, crypto was severely under attack. That has all changed under the Trump administration. We have a pro-crypto SEC chairman. We have a pro-crypto secretary of the Treasury. And now it seems even at the Federal Reserve, we are seeing Christopher Waller work towards one of the most important steps in real adoption for crypto. But this is the type of stuff that makes all the difference in how fast crypto is adopted at a national level and much more an international level, because everyone wants access to dollars. Eleanor Terrett does a really good job of explaining it. Governor Chris Waller announced the central bank is proposing a new type of limited access master account, or what he calls a skinny master account, for all legally eligible institutions to receive direct access to the Fed's payment rails so they don't have to rely on partner banks. And where crypto was getting screwed in the past through Operation Choke Point 2.0 and a bunch of other really sketchy and seedy things that the administration was doing at the time, was through partner banks. These banks were in totally good standing. They would go to the banks, and the banks were essentially shutting down access to off-ramps and on-ramps for many crypto companies, which really harmed the industry because no one wants to deposit dollars into an exchange and then not be able to withdraw them through that same exchange, which requires access to master accounts or a partner bank. In other words, with this setup, they wouldn't access all the services of a full master account, like the ability to borrow from the Fed. However, every legal eligible entity could get one, and the legal rules for eligibility wouldn't change. In other words, this would be like a light, innovative bank, including fintechs, stablecoin issuers, which XRP, or better yet, Ripple, has the RLUSD stablecoin, and other payments companies. Companies like Custodia Bank, which was shut down in the past, and Kraken would actually get their master account light essentially, and then this would open the door or speed up access for companies like Ripple and Anchorage. So if Ripple is doing all of the above and also has access to a skinny master account, there will be nothing that will stop the rate at which they're able to modernize the current financial system. And so when you combine that with essentially a buyback of the XRP token, things can really go parabolic quick. quick into the end of the year. And I'm not saying that is going to happen. The reality is I don't know. Nobody knows, but I am trying to prepare you and give you all the information possible so you can make your best educated decision. Wrath of Kahneman does a really good job of not essentially hyping things up too much and sharing the facts when it comes to Ripple, because a lot of XRP community members tend to embellish things or overstate things so they can gain followers. He tells the truth. The reality is, and I'm not saying he always tells the truth, we can get things wrong, but I think he aims to do a good job of sharing the truth. Ripple and Larson's 350 million XRP are separate from the 1 billion cash raised to buy XRP through Evernorth. In other words, there's 200 million from SBI, 200 million option from Ripple, 600 million from PIPE and public investors, which make up the $1 billion, which will be used to purchase XRP within 10 days after the funds are received. And here is that statement inside of the latest press release. And essentially what this would mean if it were to occur, we don't know the speed at which they're going to buy XRP back, how they're going to buy XRP back. That's currently private, but what we do know is if they were to use all $1 billion to buy it back, this would be the total of 400 million plus XRP demand in a very short window of time, which when you see this much demand in terms of a buyback can push the price up. So we do need to see the price start to trend to the upside, and we can probably even verify a lot of this buying through the blockchain or the XRPL. Still, one of the biggest reasons I see that the market has a bit of a headwind in front of it is the fact that this Friday we are due for our core year-over-year CPI reading, and inflation is set to increase. Think about how high we've kept interest rates over at the Fed, and they have failed to get inflation back down to their 2% target, while at the same time unemployment is rising and jobless claims are rising and there are less jobs available. They're worried about the current economic situation. They can't tame inflation, and inflation is now going to be expected to rise to 3.1%. So for this reason alone, I think markets are just a bit skittish. Investors don't want to buy into this Friday because this Friday can be a nasty sell-off if inflation comes in higher than expected at 3.1%. If we get an expected reading of 3.1% and it actually shows up as expected, you want to watch the market closely. How did it respond and react? If we get our expectations, did we not really see much of a dip? Did we see the market rally? These are all going to be indicators with the underlying strength of the market, which is where we're going to want to buy. Either way, the Fed is running blind on a few different key metrics that they usually use to make their interest rate decisions. So by Wednesday, October 29th into the next week, it's highly likely, based on a higher market risk reading, they are still going to lower the interest rate by 25 basis points for 4%, which is what I'm expecting. And so to me, it's no wonder markets are struggling to really break out, including crypto, because although we have a lot of positive news, a lot of major investors, even if it's not me and you, look at crypto as risky assets because they are volatile. And as we've seen, some of these markets, if they're less liquid, even XRP, $100+ billion asset, can dump 50% in a single day because of leverage. And no major asset manager wants to go to their clients and explain why they lost 25%, 50% in a single day. So although we have seen a boatload of positive news, obviously this news is not going to affect the price, at least among institutional players. In the case of Ripple, they can go and actually buy access to that private stock as accredited investors, but that is actually separate from XRP. I think the biggest news that we've seen for XRP holders when it comes to any of these types of acquisitions is the fact that Evernorth is now set to use $1 billion, and maybe not all of it is going to go into buying XRP, but it is going to go into helping the XRP ledger in their DeFi ecosystem. And yes, much of that will be buybacks. We want to see that show up in the price.